In July 1990, a hike to Lenin Peak was planned as part of the selection process for the Soviet Himalayan expedition. The top climbers in the USSR, including members of the Leningrad Mountaineering Club, commanded by Leonid Trishinenko, were to compete for a spot in the expedition. Everyone on the hike was a seasoned climbing veteran. However, Mother Nature can be cruel. This is how an avalanche claimed 43 souls on Lenin Peak. Lenin Peak, which stands at 7,134 meters, was first described in scientific literature in 1871. It was named in 1928 in honor of Vladimir Lenin, the Russian revolutionary and first leader of the Soviet Union. The mountain remained known by this name until 2006, when it was renamed Ibn Sina Mountain after the medieval Persian polymath Avicenna. However, most people in the post-Soviet countries still refer to it by its previous name. The peak is in Tajikistan, Central Asia's smallest country, amid the foothills of the Pamir mountain range. The climate here is subtropical, arid and often cloudless, with high temperature variations and low rainfall. Tajikistan is a landlocked country bordering Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, China, and Afghanistan. It was once part of the Soviet Union, which is why there is a Russian influence within the country. Hikers from across the Soviet Union traveled to Tajikistan to hike and admire the beauty of nature from their tents. Nowadays, Lenin Peak is one of the most accessible mountains above 7,000 meters, with up to 16 routes marked out, some of which are acceptable even for beginners. To ascend the mountain using one of the most popular routes, you must cross various terrains. The Frying Pan, a flat meadow at 5,300 meters, has long been considered the safest point on this path. It has a tent where travelers frequently stop for rest and acclimatization. In the summer, it can be blistering hot here, and even a few minutes in direct sunshine can burn you, which may explain why the clearing received its name. For this fateful hike in 1990, climbers from Czechoslovakia, Germany, Israel, and Switzerland joined the Leningrad Mountaineering Club and other Soviet professionals. The weather was not particularly pleasant, including significant snowfall, which is unusual for summer in this area. When the weather improved slightly on Friday, July 13th, several dozen climbers arrived at the Frying Pan Meadow, where some decided to camp. Vladimir Baliberdin, the first Soviet climber to reach the summit of Mount Everest, was among the expedition members. His friend Boris Sidnik and his girlfriend Yelena Uromena joined him. Baliberdin quickly chose to turn back once he had reached the Frying Pan, as he did not think the weather favored him. Boris and Yelena also began to descend with Baliberdin, but Yelena became ill and opted to return to the upper camp to rest before continuing her descent. This was the final time Boris saw his lover. She returned to the Frying Pan, unaware of what awaited her and the others who remained there. Sergei Golovtyov, another mountaineer, descended from the Frying Pan alongside Baliberdin and Sidnik. He had chosen the wrong footwear, and his feet were hurting, and thus couldn't continue the climb. Poor shoe selection would save his life. On the evening of that fateful Friday, the climbers on the Frying Pan ate dinner and rested calmly in their tents. There were 45 climbers left at the camp, all experienced, all familiar with the local weather, and all with a good understanding of avalanche protection. They appeared to be safe and well prepared for their adventure. But suddenly, at dusk, the ground beneath their tents rocked. A tremendous roar ensued. A massive avalanche swept across the camp within seconds, unseen in the darkness. This snow pile was so large that it could hardly be described as an avalanche. Rather, it was an enormous snow and ice collapse. This fatal event was almost a mile broad and more than half a mile long. The snow and ice rushed over the entire flat region, including where the trekkers had camped. All 45 individuals, resting peacefully in their tents, were overtaken. Miraculously, 2 people survived. One of them was Alexei Korin, aged 36. The avalanche threw him from his tent, where he was resting alone. Suddenly, something catapulted him, and he began spinning uncontrollably. He could only curl up and hide his face within his hands, which was physically demanding. He was thrown so forcefully that he nearly fainted. The snow mass pulled him for almost 800 yards, and just as he began to suffocate, the incredible power of the avalanche launched him off the glacier's edge, dumping him 80 feet below. Korin survived despite suffering a concussion, stomach damage, and many scrapes and bruises. Once Alexei regained his senses after the fall, he observed a man ahead of him, waist-deep in the snow. It was Miro Brosman, a Slovak climber. Korin assisted Brosman out of the snow, and the two of them began looking for clothes. They were not wearing shoes or jackets, as they were in their sleeping bags when the avalanche hit. Brosman and Korin discovered warm mats and tent shots, wrapped themselves in them, and somehow survived the night. They started their descent in the morning. Walking without shoes was very difficult. In addition, there was a white silence. Snow and fog consumed them and made navigating the mountain paths nearly impossible. Miro threw snowballs down the trail as markers. They continued like this for many hours, until Miro stated he couldn't go on. Korin had to leave him and went to find rescuers. Eventually, he found them, and he was driven to a camp at 4,200 meters. Brosman was discovered by rescuers only a few hours later, nearly frozen but alive. Both men were sent to a nearby hospital. When the rescuers arrived at the frying pan, which had once been a calm and serene spot, they realized that finding any more survivors was hopeless. On the first day of the search, only 4 bodies were recovered. The rest were buried so deeply that finding them was not possible. Even today, most individuals who died that day have yet to be found. In the mid-2000s, the fatal glacier began to melt, revealing equipment and human remains that were buried beneath the snow in 1990. Peter Chedrin, the son of one of the victims, led the first trip to remove the remains in 2007. Alexei Korin returned to Lenin Peak in 2008 and discovered the crampons and ice pick he had used during his 1990 ascent. Alexei participated in various missions commemorating the victims. Despite the accident, he retained his passion for mountaineering. In an interview, Alexei explained the remains of 10 people that have been discovered, 3 of whom have been recognized. Those who died on Lenin Peak were buried near the foot of the mountain in Lukovaya Meadow, where a memorial exists, still listing the names of everyone who perished. The Kyrgyz people designated the land for this purpose. So, was it impossible to forecast the avalanche? Alexei argues it was, however, theory soon enveloped the occurrence. One suspected cause of the avalanche was an earthquake in Afghanistan. Another possibility was the melting of ice. This natural process may have resulted in building a crucial snow mass, which would then have plummeted quickly. Those who are skeptical about these explanations believe that the unlucky date, Friday the 13th, was to blame. Another theory argues that the earthquake in Afghanistan was triggered by underground nuclear testing in China. This, of course, is all speculative and very difficult to confirm. At the time of the disaster, there had not been an avalanche on the frying pan in 30 years. The climbers that day were experienced and accustomed to mountainous terrain. If they couldn't have predicted the avalanche, perhaps no one could have. A mountain that was once thought to be tranquil and harmless claimed the lives of over 40 people in a single night. If you have made it this far into the video, then please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing if you still need to do so. Thank you for watching.